Hi Anita,
Hi,
thank you for agreeing for this interview.
you're really welcome. It's an honour.
Given that you have covered the fields of both psychotherapy and organizational work in TA, how would you define yourself? Who is Anita?
Well, somebody else described me as iconoclastic. I had to go home and look up the word because I didn't know what it meant. I thought it was a compliment. And I think it's a melding of different things. So originally I was a youth worker, so I'm quite radical in my thinking, although being radical and confronting, I can do it, but sometimes it costs. So I'm the sort of person that will challenge, but what other people don't see is the cost underneath sometimes. My ability to challenge and my personal emotion hasn't quite caught up with each other. I'm getting there now as I get older. So I'm fairly radical. I don't put up with things that I think need to be changed. And if I can't make sense of something, I can't teach it. So, and I think that comes from my family background plus training as a youth and community worker, where not how can I put it? If there's an injustice, as a youth worker, I would defend people or think about how something can be changed or what can be done to improve people's lives. And there's an expression, it's no good getting somebody when they've fallen in the river and down the other end. You have to find out who's pushing them in the river or how are they falling in order to get them out. So that's very much my aim, whether that's psychotherapy or organisational work.
And I can imagine that the environment in working with youth people was many times quite crisp in terms of the interventions that you had to do. It wouldn't leave room for many interpretations, right?
No, you had to be very quick. I worked on the streets with young people, so I didn't have a building,
Right.
so I worked with where they were. So you had to watch out for your back a lot of the time. They were tough young people and very alienated from society. So then that's where I worked, was on the street corners. So you have to look after yourself. You have to be thinking a lot of the time and very fast. So part of my personality is persistent personality, which means you're very good on process.
Right.
But it was put into practice a lot during work on streets with young people.
So do you think that this is what influenced you to move or to incorporate also the organizational TA, because you started in psychotherapy?
Yes. Oh, well, I didn't start in psychotherapy with intention. I just wanted to learn transaction analysis, and in those days I didn't know there were 4 fields of TA. Nobody told me, so I just thought, oh, the way you learn TA is to become a psychotherapist, and if the way I need to learn TA is to do psychotherapy, then I'll do that then, because it helped me as a person. So I think if it helps me, it can help other people. So that's when I started to learn it. But I in a way, I became a psychotherapist by default, not by...
Okay.
And I enjoyed doing it, but I don't do it anymore. I gave it up about 2 years ago.
Coming back a bit to who is Anita, if you would think who was Anita, I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, or when you were just starting the TA training, and who is Anita now, what do you think has changed quite a lot?
I think then I had something to prove to myself in the early days, that I went to a school that was a really run-down school in a very deprived area, and a lot of the families were very deprived. So that if you went to this particular school, came from this particular area, you were the lowest of the low. You weren't going to go anywhere, you weren't going to do anything. And so I think now that isn't who I am, because I think I carried that around with me for quite some time. With there's an expression in English, a chip on their shoulder. You know, it's like I've got something to prove, and it was to prove it to me, not to anybody else particularly. But I don't think I need to do that anymore. So for myself, just who I am.
Thank you for sharing this. What TA school would you most identify yourself with now? How does this influence your work as a psychotherapist and organizational consultant, or how was this influencing you when you were doing psychotherapy?
Well, I trained at Metanoia in the early days before it was purely relational. So the way in which I worked then, and then I became community trained in a sense. I would go to different people's training. So I experienced myself as integrating the then, not so many schools as we have now. And I have got a lot from the relational school, but I wouldn't identify myself with that by any means. And I think that organisational work is very integrative in the way it pulls from a whole range of other aspects anyway. So I tend to be a bit of a mix really, and I couldn't say that I am relational or I am classical school. It's really about what works now, what's going to help this person or this organisation, and how can that be of benefit to them.
So if you would be thinking of the classical TA and all the other schools that have developed in the last years, do you see a big difference between them in terms of the way you apply it, or not really?
I suppose because I've always done things my way anyway, like developing the OK modes model and three-dimensional okayness. It's not been something that I've needed to really think, well, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. I think that I would tend to agree with Julie Hay that when she developed the idea of developmental TA, that was her terminology, and I think we therefore tend to focus on the much more positive psychology aspects rather than on psychopathology, which we would do if we were in psychotherapy. And I think there was a huge difference about what you focus on, how you help people to develop by focusing on strengths. And as a youth worker, that's what I used to do all the time, is starting from strengths rather than starting from weaknesses. So it's more to do with developmental approaches to TA really than on the pathology side.
And by framing the work this way, it's not that it doesn't matter which TA school you apply.
No.
You just focus on a different, or
Yes.
you move your focus.
The frame of reference is different.
Right.
So you'll be thinking much more about, so what is the strength that this person has that we can fan the flames on? It's very much using physis. If we think about physis, that's coming from, it's a thrust of life itself. So if we believe in the thrust of life itself, that person or those people or that team will have physis. It will be there. We have to trust it will be there and then find a way through.
Is it related to what Byrne was referring to in terms of free energy?
Yes, I think it's that, and also it's how we can help people. If you just think about the essence of okayness, that it isn't just purely behavioural. I think Ernst looked at it as behavioural, whereas it's a philosophy and a way of being, and that needs to encompass the whole of our lives. When somebody comes training in TA with me, I don't say to them, I'll teach you TA. I say, I'll teach you to become a transaction analyst, because it's how we are as people that really is a role model for what a transaction analyst is, and we need to be able to practice it and become it rather than just do TA to other people. And that's not so easy. And how do you examine for that?
Yeah, that's a process.
Yeah, it's a process, and I think things like 360-degree feedback that we have in organisations would be a really excellent way of finding about how do we as people come across to our colleagues, people that we don't know so well, do we embody that philosophical sense of okayness and that all those processes. And for me that's a different and hard one. But it's a journey. It
is a journey. It is a bit similar with the integrating adult.
Yeah.
It's a process, an ongoing process.
Yes, exactly. So I don't think it's an easy journey, but I think there are people, who pick up books out there and charge £500 and whatever it would be, $1,000 for doing TA training, but they're not qualified, and that's part of our own issue. That it became in the public domain, which is really good, and yet it also shoots ourselves in the foot because people think they know TA because they've read a book, and they don't know that there are people out there who have a much more in-depth approach to TA.
In both your papers published in the TAJ, and I would like to mention them, the ones that I'm referring to. So the first one is the relevance of culture and relationship dynamics for closing escape hatches in therapy from 2000. And assessing systems and processes in organizations from 2005, also in TAJ. So in both of these papers, you emphasize the role of culture and cultural differences. What has been your personal experience with different cultures in general and the way you perceive them?
I think it started when I was young, being brought up in a very rough area where we were the lowest of the low, and in that even on our street there was some were more okay than others. So in order for people to feel better about themselves, we had to make the people at the top of the street worse than us. So they were dirtier, or they didn't act right. So that's what my parents did down at the bottom of our street. So that started the process. And so you knew if you were born on that estate that you weren't going to go anywhere, do anything, because that's what the expectation was. So then the schooling reinforced that where we went to school. And then, as I went to Youth and Community Work College, I went to a city which is very different from the town that I lived in, and it was very multi-ethnic. And we had, lots of different cultures on our course. And it was a real eye-opener for me about how other people's experiences of life and the world. And I was brought up with quite a racist father. And I'm very grateful for youth and community work training that really helped me to challenge all of that. Because I think when people experience prejudice in the way that we did on our estate, it's very easy then to make others not okay in order to feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that went on a lot. And so somehow, gladly, I escaped that process. And it's really important for me that we do everything about okayness, like the coffee we buy, or where the flowers come from, and what water do we take from other people in order to grow our flowers. Those very basic things that we exploit other people. And I think that okayness means non-exploitation and thinking through what we do in as much as we can.
So any indirect influence that we have on the world and in our environment, we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, it's a very good word. It's in the centre of our OK modes model.
Right. Your OK model with the mindfulness.